Welcome to Discovering. Tonight is all about Manoomin, an ancient grain native to the Great Lakes region.
It's an annual plant, so it's not a perennial plant, so it doesn't keep growing. This plant has the adaptability to continue to stay around as long as we care for it.
So sit back and relax. It's Monday night, and it's time for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
Manoomin, also known as wild rice, is an ancient species of grain-producing grass native to the Great Lakes area. It grows in the shallow, quiet waters of inland lakes and slow-flowing streams. Once plentiful in places like the Upper Peninsula, wild rice beds have dwindled due to habitat loss, degraded water quality, and other factors.
I wanted to kind of explain to you about this plant. This plant is an annual plant, and this is when we harvest it. The upper part here is what we actually harvest. This is where the grain and the rice is. And each little bench mark there was where there was a grain. And so you can see, like on this one or like this one, you can see where this is the female part, this is the harvestable part, this is the one that needs to be pollinated. And you can see all of these spikes here. This is where the male flower grows in July. These, they don't self-pollinate. One of the biggest pollinators that this plant has is the wind. And so as the wind blows these plants over, it actually pollinates these grains. Here's one of the predators. It's what we call a rice worm, and that's a larvae. That's a larvae of that little white moth that flies around here. But when they fall like that, they're good bait for the fish too.
The life cycle of Manoomin begins in August or September when the grain seed drops from the plant.
And this has a tail, so it goes down like a missile. It'll stay down there over the winter. It needs 90 days or more of 39-degree temperatures for it to germinate. In the spring, after the ice leaves this water, you can see how clear this water is. So in the spring, as the ice leaves and it starts receiving that sunlight, and the clarity of this water allows it to do so. So what it will do is it'll put one taproot down, and then it'll come up, and then it'll put what we call a floating leaf stage. And that's when it's the most vulnerable, because it only has one small root going down into the sediment. And so you can see where this is the major taproot, and it has another secondary. So this allows that plant to stand up. In April, May, it comes up, puts it in the floating leaf stage, grows the secondary root system. These stand up through May and June. Then they flower in July. They get pollinated, and then in August they actually mature, and then in September we actually harvest it. So each one of these plants has a 1-year life cycle. Uju get you manado. Mantikuna Bay and Dijnikas. Gigu do a dem. Ojibu Anishinaabe and the Dao. Keke get the Ganing and Nunjiba. Creator, we're out here today to get some coverage of why you are here, what you provide for us as Anishinaabe people. And we honor and we respect you, and we honor you as a...
Manoomin means the good berry in Ojibwe and is not only a traditional food of the Anishinaabe, but also a spiritual gift from the Creator. Known as the food that grows on water, Manoomin is what brought Native people to the Great Lakes region.
It is one of those indicators in our migration from the East Coast. It was an indicator that we would find our new home. And it's been a staple food for us ever since our migration. And so we honor it, and it actually is now part of our identity, very much like our language. My mentor, who asked me to continue doing this work after he walked on, told me to fight and restore this, because if we lose this rice, it's part of our identity that we lose. What we need to harvest rice is we need a canoe. In our regulations at LVD, it can't be longer than 16 feet, wider than 36 inches. And one of the things that we use to propel is we use this. This is called a push pole. And this is made out of a conifer. It's made out of three pieces. One is ideally, if you can find a tamarack about this size, that would be great. We're using black spruce, balsam, and cedar. This fork is made out of a hardwood. We use this to purchase in the secondary root system, and it allows me to push the canoe through the water. And we have it joined together here. That's what it's lashed. So that's what we use to push us through to the rice. Because if we use paddles or oars, the force that we use to try to propel this canoe through that rice bed, it'll break those stalks. The other thing that you need is a set of ricing sticks. These ricing sticks were handed down to me by my grandmother. Well, what Tony's going to do is, as we're pushing it, wild rice will be coming up over his shoulders like this. And so he's going to kind of like do a backstroke. He's going to lay that head of that plant over, and he's going to knock that rice into the canoe. He's going to lay it over with one hand and either hit the stick or the stalk, and that rice will fall. I could really make him work if I really push this canoe.
Since 2007, Roger Lebin has hosted a wild rice camp, and this year on Labor Day weekend, it was held in Baraga. I dropped in on the day they were making these traditional tools for harvesting Manoomin.
Everything from tool making and also the spiritual, traditional, cultural, ecological, and even economical things of wild rice and what it could do for the community today. It's not only open to tribal members, it's open to the general public, because part of our job is education and outreach to all people to make things successful and for us to work together. And actually there is a increasing desire by non-tribal people as they become familiar with the value and how really wild rice tastes. Some of them takes them a couple of meals to make it really good, but there is an increasing people of wanting to harvest wild rice. Anybody can go out and harvest wild rice, and that's part of another reason of why these camps are available to non-tribal people, is to help them understand the best way to go out and harvest it and safely, and make sure everybody can benefit from it. It's an annual plant. So it's not a perennial plant, so it doesn't keep growing. Each crop, each year is dependent on the seed bank. And so, at some point, if you go in with an airboat or a rowboat or whatever and destroy that bed, it has an impact for several years.
The traditional methods of hand harvesting and protecting Manoomin are because the grain is a delicate plant that needs ideal water quality and conditions to thrive.
Well, wild rice is kind of what we call it as a keystone species. The water quality has to be very, very high quality. Clarity has to be there, which means there's no turbidity. The bottom has got to be very, very organic. If you push this down, when you hit the bottom, your paddle will still keep going, and it's muddy, right? And it's very loose. So it has to be loose soil for that seed to put that taproot down, and it has to be anywhere from 6 to 18 inches, very, very organic. The pH has to be, anything from 6.1 to 7.8. This actually has to have a flow, because the flow actually keeps the temperature down. And when the temperature stays low, then we have what we call dissolved oxygen. And so then this plant strives on that dissolved oxygen. If this water warms up, the dissolved oxygen goes down. So one of the other things that is very, very important is the water level. The water level has to be pretty much consistent. It can't rise up and down, especially in that floating leaf stage. So that leaf, when you have a wake or even a wind, when you get the bigger winds, it's like keeps tugging at it. And so since the sediment is so loose, it'll only withstand, and it'll actually become uprooted. And even in June and July, when we get those severe rain events where there's a lot of rain and high winds, it'll bend to try to protect itself. But even if the winds are so high, even with your secondary root system, some of these plants, when you come out here, you'll see them floating because of the intense winds that come with severe rain events. That's one of the threats, is what they call climate change. We can kind of safely say that now. But for a while there, it wasn't basically allowed. But we're in the final year of a research project with the Army Corps of Engineers, and looking at the impact of climate change on these rice beds. And we're coming up with management practices and how to adapt to the changing conditions here. The technology has given us where we can actually do continuous monitoring through various equipment we call loggers, where we don't have to put what we call the boots on the ground and come out here once or twice or 3 times a week to get the data. Those loggers will actually collect that for us, and we can come to a conclusion of the condition of what's changing, and maybe what is affecting the rice bed. And water is life. And so until we extract all the moisture, it still is a medicine. This plant is both a medicine and a food. And we call it green weight. After we harvest it, after we take it out of our canoe, we take it in and we put it down on tarps, and we can air dry it out for 3 to 5 days. And that's to allow the moisture to leave it. Because if we store it with moisture in it, it will spoil. It will most likely mold.
In addition to the push-pulls and ricing sticks, participants at the wild rice camp also built tools for processing the wild rice from a medicine to a food.
Leah is making a winnowing basket, or a basket out of birch bark. And this birch bark basket will be used in the separating of the chaff and actually the wild rice after we parch it. So it is put in there and it's shaken. And the wind, like today, would take all the chaff off, and all the good wild rice will stay in here. So all of these tools that we were making here today are made out of raw materials, the traditional way, harvested in the traditional way, given tobacco, spoken for.
During the camp, the traditional ways of separating the grain from the husk are taught: parching, dancing on the rice in a jigging pit, and winnowing using the birch bark basket. But now, they have a modern contraption to speed up the process.
We call this the Manoominator. This is us trying to get caught up with the commercialization of everything. So basically what this machine does, it does the jigging, the separating, and the winnowing basket. So you put your wild rice in here and it actually kind of acts like a thrasher. So this goes around and around, and it kind of does the same action as you dancing on it or standing on it and dancing on it. And then we have a blower on the side here. This is the birch bark basket because it blows air in through there and it takes all the chaff out this hole here.
These new Manoominators came from Gliffwick, the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, and each local tribe was given two. Roger built the original prototype after seeing how commercial paddy rice operations thrashed their rice.
So I kind of had an idea of what to do. It was just getting something that was small and compact where you didn't have to worry about processing tons. And I don't remember how it came to be, but I started acting like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I said, we're going to call it the Manoominator. As from the Terminator, the movie. So I always told everybody that at the end of rice camps and everything, I said, I'll be back.
To see the Manoominator in action, I visited Roger on another day as he processed his own wild rice. Roger bought the wild rice he's processing today from Mole Lake in Wisconsin, as there isn't enough to harvest at Lac Vieux Desert.
They don't like it when I tell them, I said they have the second best rice, but when there's none on Lac Vieux Desert, it's the best rice to get.
But before the wild rice goes into the Manoominator, it has to be parched in a metal pan over a fire to remove any remaining moisture.
Okay, what we're gonna do is we put this in the pan so that it's at a 45-degree angle, and so that the fire, the heat is up here. This bottom portion is going to be cool, and what we really want to do is when we're parching this, we want to do it gradually. Well, usually 10 to 15 minutes. Indicators of when your rice is going to be pretty dried out is actually when that dust starts to turn, start turning black. Look at how it's starting to turn golden. Oh yeah, getting close, really close. By the time you get it home and you air dry it 3 to 5 days, get rid of the moisture, and then you get rid of the rest of the moisture and the fire and the husk, you end up with 50 to 60% of whatever your green rice is when it comes off the lake. So your yield from green rice to processed rice is about 50 to 60%. So. That's how the Manoominator works. And that's 2 batches. So that's probably about, maybe 2, maybe 3 pounds. Got to be cleaned up a little bit yet, but.
The Lac Vieux Desert and Keweenaw Bay communities have been working for many years on restoring Manoomin on the lakes and streams in the western UP.
We have 14 sites that we're doing right now. We're going to probably be looking at additional sites, but we're hoping that the data that we collect will give us a good indication of future sites and what conditions would be best to pursue an introduction or finding out a bed that historically had rice bed. What do we need to do to correct and why it disappeared? I think that this plant has the adaptability to continue to stay around as long as we care for it, because it was all but gone, and it was only with restoration efforts, recent restoration efforts by the federally recognized tribes in Michigan to bring this back.
That's all for tonight, and I hope to see you right back here next week for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.